So, for my assignment, I decided to touch on the issues of domestic violence in this country, which is a lot more prevalent than I thought before doing my research, and I think a lot of people in this country think. Um, Things that alarmed me during this process were a lot of the statistics that I found. Um, for example, every minute 20 people are experiencing some form of domestic violence, and also it taught me that there isn't that much of a gap between the domestic violence reports for women and for men. For example, I learned that 1 in 4 women alongside 1 in 9 men experience some form of physical domestic violence from their partners. I also learned that the leading state for domestic violence is actually Kentucky. And for me, that's one state I never would have just come up with at the top of my head to be the leading state for domestic violence. 45% of women and 35% of men in that state experience some form of domestic violence. So, while doing my research, I also came across a lot of organizations in the surrounding cities where I live that also provide support for people that are experiencing domestic violence, such as the Safety Alliance in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Battered Women's Shelter in Charlotte, North Carolina, which are just like two organizations that are providing resources and providing support for women and men who are going through this. Not necessarily providing them with a plan of exit, which they do, but they also provide them with just a helping hand or just someone to talk to. And there's also several hotlines, domestic violence or hotlines that people are able to look up and call and just have that support whenever they need to. So specifically for my interviewing process, touching on domestic violence, I was able to interview someone who was the child of an abuser and someone who experienced domestic violence, and it was really important, I felt like, to hear their side of the experience, what it's like to just constantly see violence going on in your household, to see your parent causing harm and being harmed, and how that truly just shapes your perspective of the world around you, how that shapes your perspective of yourself. And also it just helped me to realize that domestic violence can be talked about sooner in life than it's truly led on to. Usually in schools, we hear about domestic violence or like partner violence in high school, but I think that it can be taught as early as middle school, and it should be taught a lot more and more in depth. So I was able to talk to this person through a phone call, and even though we didn't get to speak face to face, I feel like the conversation that we had was very in depth, and that I was still able to feel and hear their emotions through the phone. We touched on subjects about their childhood, what it was like for them to grow up the way they did, just seeing their father who was going through his own demons and addictions, and how that affected their family, and how that specifically affected their mom, who was experiencing domestic violence at the hands of her husband. The person who I interviewed, they didn't necessarily want to be named, but they just like let me know and was telling was telling me about how watching their mother be abused by their father truly changed how they viewed relationships, and not in the perspective of they felt like it was okay for women to be abused by men, but in the perspective that they didn't want a relationship. They didn't want to even put themselves out there to experience that sort of pain. And they genuinely had the belief that there were no good men and there were no good partners out there to support them and not truly treat them how they should be treated. And it was enlightening to see and to hear how therapy, how the support of their friends, how religion has led them to realize that had nothing to do with them, and what they experienced as a child or what they saw as a child shouldn't deter them from finding healthy relationships for themselves. So that was truly encouraging to hear and to experience. I think this is ultimately just taught me to just be a helping hand and to just be a support system for anyone that I may know. Not necessarily saying that someone you may know will be in a domestic violence situation, but you always want to make sure that they feel supported and that they feel loved enough to, when they could possibly be in that situation, that they don't keep it in and that they don't try to hide it, and that they're able to express themselves and reach out to someone to help them through that situation, because it is rough and it is hard to get over that. And when you stay grounded as a support system for yourself and others, it makes it easier for both you and them.